Hey, welcome back to the Mobility WOD. Tonight we're going to continue our conversation about the relationship of the arm to the shoulder and or arm to the body, and specifically kind of thinking about the next set of relationships that helps me understand better arm function and shoulder function. When we discuss the arm and shoulder complex, it's a little bit confusing, it's a little bit muddy for people. So here's what we're going to do. Yesterday we talked about restoring and kind of the relationship of the scapula to the trunk or scapula to the thorax. Thinking about the arm and shoulder joint as a floating hip joint, I've got to set the joint in position. So that's relationship 1 to manage. You saw that yesterday. Relationship 2 we've got to manage is the relationship of the arm to the body. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Not necessarily the arm to the rotator cuff, or excuse me, arm to the scapula, but arm to body. What are you saying? I'm talking about the musculature that goes from the kind of big peripheral skeleton, the arm bones, literally kind of bypassing the shoulder blade and attach right to the mainframe. This would be pecs. This would be lat. This would be some of the, well, not really the tricep. You get the idea. The idea here is that a lot of these big movers, and we think about the relationship of these things, basically internally rotate us. This is how I groom other animals, this is how I feed myself, and pretty much all the things that I do are in this little box, and they're pretty much internally rotating all the time, and I'm designed to tackle the buffalo, etc. What I'm not designed to do is be externally rotated into a good position. In fact, if you carry this idea and see how tonically short we get, kind of habitually short we get, go ahead and look at the difference of your pull-up position versus your, chin-up position versus your pull-up position. Palms facing versus palms away. So most of the time athletes come in, they've got a bucket load of chins. We ask them to flip their week here. After a while, this becomes our default position in 95% of our athletes, except for Greg Amundsen, who likes what it does for his arms. But the rest of us are probably a little bit deficient in being able to externally rotate that position, because all the big movers that we're used to kind of firing and relying on are internal rotators. So if you look at my this position where I've got palm facing, I can get in a pretty good position without much work, right? As soon as I flip that around, because I'm an athlete who uses my lats a lot, this ends up being a much higher stretch position where it's actually very difficult for me to feel like I can get into a good overhead position. And what's limiting me there? Everything that wants to internally rotate me and is limited in this flexion position. Lats, pecs, tris, all those things. In fact, this becomes a pretty potent mobilization tool where I can literally hang and open up. So your test tonight is I want you to look at the differences between your pull-up number, and I guarantee you, you cannot do as many chins palm facing you as palm away. And remember, the original CrossFit Dogma piece was that you need, or CrossFit model in the journal, but Greg Glassman, is that this needs to equal this. Our goal is to find inefficiencies and weaknesses, and I'm guaranteeing you that you guys all have a weakness here. So tonight, homework number 1, find out how many chins you can do. Bet you $1 million. It's fewer than the number of pull-ups you can do, okay? So check that out. Number 2 is let's go ahead and talk about some of that big musculature. So the very first thing we're going to do is take off the kind of obvious big mover here of the lower arm, the bicep, but it also relates to the front of the arm here. So we're going to just go ahead and hit this big piece. This is my favorite. Wind up the external rotation, turn away. You'll feel the stretch through the bicep, and definitely as it relates into the head of the shoulder. Now this doesn't kind of hit the parameters that we were talking about, but we'll get there. So that's homework number 1. Homework number 2 is that we want to go ahead and wind up into this classic arm flexion, arm flexion. So arm flexion, arm flexion. I'm going to wind up this position first, pressing the armpit into the wall, and then that's my loader, and my tensioner is the tricep over the top. So go ahead and hit and bias that arm coming down as the second. So really wind up. If you need to unimpinge for a second, unpinge, come back in, press, hang out, and then hit there. That's that second one. And again, you know, what we're thinking about, what are the big movers of the arm? Lat obviously is a big one. More importantly, it's not a muscle, it's a movement. But I have to understand what's going on, probably what's the gross limiter of the whole system. So let's go ahead and go into lat overhead position. And remember, what we're trying to do is think critically about what are the relationship blocks, what are the block tissue restrictions that are limiting these relationships. So these are the second set, and I'm going to go ahead and hang out in here for number 3. Then I probably need to actually get into some of this tissue in the front here. And how you want to do that is up to you. You can do the para-rescue mode, where you literally set the shoulder back, fall down, whoop, and you can even get a pec ball in here, wind that shoulder up. The key with the strap is it keeps my shoulder back and allows me to get into these corners differently than if I did the kind of classic shoulder forward position, which I'm not a big fan of. So if you're going to hang out in here and open up, this is pretty effective. Get your weight through there and grinding through. Clearly, that's not required to do that. You can even put your hand behind your back and open that up. Instead of hitting the pec minor, we're hitting more of the chest. Make sense? Finally, probably it's worth talking about some of the external rotators here as a component. You can either lay this on the ground. Our guys at the gym are loving this instead. What they do is they go ahead and lay this into a corner on the wall. They find it where they're tight and they just pull that arm back and forth. And ironically, this looks a lot like the ART manual of working on some of those external rotators. So I get into the teres minor, and then as I pull that thing starts to get lengthened, and I can just go back and forth through here. And if you do it around the corner, you can actually stretch the arm around the corner. But just loading some of the back, and that will get kind of the musculature of the relationship of the shoulder blade to the arm. But that's the kind of second layer we're thinking about. We were thinking about organizing the shoulder, then we're thought about the relationship of the scapula to the shoulder. Now we're going to talk about arm and some of the musculature of the arm to the shoulder blade trunk complex. Make sense? See you guys tomorrow.